There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is your mountain. Hey everybody, welcome again to the Your Mountain podcast. I'm your host, David Wilms. I've got Nephi Cole here.
I'm still here.
You are still here, and we're grateful for that, especially because Mike McGrady is again not here.
Yeah, he needed a vacation though. He does more work on this podcast than the rest of us.
Combined.
He
probably
does.
Combined.
Like Dave and I show up and just talk. Mike really is the man. Like, honestly, he cranks it out.
Like this podcast would not happen but for Mike.
Yeah, because we don't know how the buttons even work on this recorder.
It took us forever to set up this equipment.
We literally thought last night we were going to have to call Mike and be like, gosh, where's this cord go? If people could see this, there's at least 50 cords on this table in front of us.
Give or take. Yeah.
Give or take 45.
Yeah. And so we've been here now for a couple of days. We're in Tampa, Florida, and we're at the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies annual meeting. This brings in professionals that work in the conservation and outdoor industry from all over North America. They come to this thing. I don't know. There are probably 500 or 600 people at this conference, coming from all different areas of conservation, right? So you got all states are represented. You got federal agencies represented. You've got trade associations. You've got non-government organizations. You've got just about anybody you can think of. And we've got one of the attendees in the room with us today, and we're pretty excited about this. Ryan Bronson, thanks for being with us today.
I am happy to be here. This is my 12th straight AFLA conference, so I've been coming to these for 12 straight years.
So I've been coming to these for about a decade, and I'm kind of curious how we have not crossed paths at these.
You're notoriously antisocial.
Yep, he is. I've heard.
So I think that's part of it. And the other thing is I try to stick with the pure biologists and not the ones that have been tainted by law school.
Well, that'd be a good reason that we don't cross paths. Then.
I heard a rumor, so Ryan, and I don't know if you can confirm or deny this, but I got here a little bit later than Dave. He was here a day before me. I heard a rumor that Dave was singing karaoke and took off his shirt.
Hang on, I gotta interject because this could go sideways on me in a hurry. I did take off my shirt.
I know, I've got video of it,
but I was not singing karaoke. I want to be 100% clear. I was a groupie for somebody else singing karaoke.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I took off my shirt to casually throw it on stage in support of a colleague who will go nameless unless Ryan wants to name him.
I'll just name his state. He's from Oklahoma.
He is from Oklahoma.
And he did not sing anything from the musical Oklahoma.
No, but he pretty much, it's like he was trying to find songs that had Oklahoma in lyrics referencing Oklahoma.
Which, oddly enough, is not hard.
No, there are quite a few.
Yeah. Well, I've always been amazed how many songs are about Wyoming, and it's almost impossible to find a song about my home state, Minnesota.
Yeah, we were talking about the other night,
yeah.
And I gave that some additional thought, and I still have nothing.
So God Bless America, Lee Greenwood. He sings about, from the lakes in Minnesota and then
to the hills of Tennessee.
To the hills of Tennessee.
Kyle Lamb's going to be so happy when he hears this.
And then if you ever listen to the Trampled by Turtles, they're kind of a new age. Now that sounds pejorative. They're a new bluegrass band. They're out of Minnesota. It's great rocking alternative bluegrass. They sing about Minnesota a lot, but that's because they're from Minnesota. So I would say check those out. And, if this podcast does not turn into a great, analysis of great country music, I hope, I'll be very disappointed.
So Ryan, before everybody thinks you're just a DJ.
Yep.
Yeah, what do you do?
I am the Director of Conservation and Public Policy for a company called Vista Outdoor. And most people don't know what Vista Outdoor is, and that's fine because there's nothing you can go to the store and buy that says Vista Outdoor. But the brands that we own and that I'm actively engaged in the conservation and government relations side for, Federal Ammunition, Savage Arms, RCBS Reloading, Bushnell Optics, and then, so that's kind of the shooting sports side, and there's about 40 other brands that I, at some point will probably name drop most of them. And then on the other side of our business, we're on the outdoor rec space. We have Bell helmets, Giro helmets. We have Camelback is our big brand on the outdoor rec space. So we're a pretty broad company.
Yep.
We're a little over $2 billion in annual sales. So we're a big player in the outdoor rec world and in the shooting sports world. And what I do is I make sure that we have places for our customers to use our products. So I work on wildlife issues, public lands issues, conservation issues, and then obviously, government relations when you're a gun company is much more complicated. So I work on gun issues as well. So I try to be a mile wide and I try to be 2 inches deep, but I don't know if I always make it.
So I have to ask a question. Not even ask a question. I have to make a statement.
Okay, you make a statement. Now I'm going to make one.
Okay, because having worked in government for a lot of years, I have members of the public that are frequently telling me, I pay your salary. Mm-hmm. I want, where are my tax dollars going? I pay your salary, right? And they want accountability. And hearing you list off all of these brands, I think Nephi and I could probably safely say, I pay your salary.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say I was at a shooting competition this last weekend. It's a multi-day adventure race, and I was gonna say you saved my life. Thank you, Camelback, because I had to fill that reservoir, 3-liter reservoir once every 4 hours as we ran /walk/hike to not die as we're moving through these mountains. And then I was going to tell you one of our competitors, a guy named Tom Fuller, who is a PRS shooter for you guys. He at this same event, he dropped his backpack with his rifle and his optic off of a 50-foot cliff and burned that thing, just like cratered it right into the bottom, took it out, kept shooting, and it held at 0. It had one of your Bushnells on it,
really?
A high-end Bushnell.
So the high-end tactical Bushnell scopes are they're great glass. They're
you can
well built.
Literally drop it off of a cliff, apparently, and it'll hold at 0. So I was very impressed.
I'm not going to encourage people to drop them off cliffs, but it's good to know that when it happens, it works. So
what is involved in? You sort of described what your job is, but what do you do? I mean, what's a day like in the life of?
Well, first of all, my days are very different from day to day. They're all over the place, but I travel a lot. So our company has a fairly small government relations shop, and yet we're bigger than almost every other company in the outdoor space who most companies don't have government relations. So we've got a lobbyist out in D.C. He takes care of Congress and the big issues that are going on in D.C. I kind of oversee our state programs. I've got a background in state government. I grew up in Minnesota. I worked for a governor in Minnesota. I worked at the legislature in Minnesota for a long time. So I've got a background in state government relations. I kind of I understand what legislators can and can't do and what they're going through, and so we try to work at the state level. So I do that. I try not to ever have to register to be a lobbyist in any one place. So we limit how much our engagement is. We're not spending money on campaigns and things like that. We're just talking about public policy issues that affect us. So I had a week earlier this year where it was in February. I flew to Yuma, Arizona, and Yuma's not an easy place to fly to, but I flew to Yuma, Arizona, testified before the Arizona Game and Fish Commission there on a trail camera issue. We're one of the world's largest manufacturers of trail cameras, so we care about those. Arizona was looking at some restrictions on trail cameras, so I went there, testified there. had a great experience talking to the commissioners. Lost the vote 5-0. They've since backed off that issue, and we can get into that later on if you guys want to. But then I flew from Yuma, Arizona to Rapid City. No, it wasn't Rapid City. It was Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where I attended the Pheasants Forever national event. Their Pheasant Fest was going on up there. Went to a Turnpike Troubadours concert that night when I got in there because, they're awesome.
And that's what you got to do.
That's what you got to do. Greatest band touring in the United States right now, Turnpike Troubadours.
Well, that sounds like another discussion.
It is.
Yeah.
So then, so I did that night. The next morning, I got up, worked our booth at Pheasant Fest, gave a speech that night to 500 of my closest Pheasants Forever conservationists, and explained to them how every time they bought a box of shells, they were paying an 11% tax called the Pittman-Robertson tax. So I told that whole story, and you guys have done a great job explaining that program. So told that whole story, and then reminded them, when you buy a box of federal ammunition that's got the Pheasants Forever logo on that, you're also contributing more money because we take a portion of the proceeds there and give it to Pheasants Forever, and they're using that to pay for acquiring public lands in places where pheasants live and quail live, and doing those things. So that was, that's a fun week. And then we've got weeks where, I'm here at this conference, and
This is fun.
Hey, wait, whoa.
No, this is awesome.
This is a great conference.
We're sitting up overlooking the bay out here over Tampa Bay. It's dramatic. But I'll be here talking. So this week I'm talking to legislators about a whole bunch, or not legislators, state wildlife folks about a whole bunch of issues, trying to get a bunch of states to legalize number 9 shot for turkey hunting and 10 shot, because we've got a new tungsten-based product that, unfortunately, some of the regulations are rooted in the past when they were trying to promote, head shots with lead shot, and we've got a product on the market that is made out of tungsten, and we want to use smaller shot. So I'm doing that. And we made some good progress on that issue by coming to this conference, talking to those people that are going to go back and hopefully rewrite the regs to be more inclusive.
The tungsten is good stuff.
It is. It's expensive, but it's way, way dense, and that's awesome.
So my dad swears by tungsten. Mm-hmm. He uses it all the time. I would, but I have price points that I'm willing to pay.
Yes.
As Nephi knows.
We've had this discussion in a goose blind before.
Yeah. So I'm a steel guy in a goose blind.
But I wanted to back up a little bit, because your company, you talked a little bit about what you do with Pheasants Forever and about federal ammunition and Pittman-Robertson. And first of all, people just don't understand the breadth of what you guys do. And I think you have some stats on, just how much Vista Outdoors through Pittman-Robertson gives to, as a company, how much you guys give to conservation. But I think that what I wanted to touch on was your company, Vista Outdoors, again, you said most people don't even know what they are, has been such a powerful advocate for conservation issues. I met you at the Shooting, Hunting, Outdoor trade show. People call it the SHOT Show. When I was working for Governor Mead, when you guys came in and you said you wanted to visit with Governor Mead about public lands. And about kind of this, and very few people were willing to do that at the time. But here, at a corporation coming in and talking to a sitting governor, saying, if I recall correctly, you guys said, "Look, don't this lands transfer thing. We don't think this is a good idea. This can be harmful to us, in our industry, and Vista Outdoors and all of our brands."
In the last couple of years, I think you see there's some organizations and there's some businesses that make a big splash, try to make a big deal, that they're advocates for public lands, and they do it, more publicly. We've got a philosophy. We're quieter about it. We talk to the policymakers that are important. So the fact that Governor Mead was willing to come into our booth and ask us questions about our business and what Wyoming could do to help attract businesses like ours to the state, it was an opportunity. It was an entree for me to say, to Governor Mead, there's a lot of great things about the economic the economics of Wyoming. However, one of the things we're concerned about is a bigger public policy thing, and it's the loss of access to public lands. And so the transfer of lands to the states is an issue. It's a little controversial, especially since, on the shooting sports side, we're fairly politically conservative. But, it was an important issue. We wanted to get that on the table. And sometimes policymakers are surprised. I give tours of the federal ammunition factory all the time to Congress people that are coming through, and they're almost always they're gun guys, and they want to see how ammo's made. And I always take that opportunity to talk about public lands and to talk about CRP, because especially when you go through our shot shell factory, without CRP, that shot shell factory doesn't have a lot of, we'd be making target loads, but there's not a lot of game loads that would be needed, whether it's steel or tungsten, for ducks or pheasants. So we try to use those opportunities, because people think we're only going to talk about taxes, we're going to talk about labor, we're going to talk about all those metal prices, import, export, and those are all important things to our business. But at the end of the day, we are not going to have customers to purchase our products, and across the whole gamut of our products, whether it's arrows from Gold Tip in Utah, or ammunition, or firearms from Massachusetts with Savage Arms, or Camelback hydration packs. People use those in outdoor places, and they need to have access to those outdoor places, and so that it's just centrally important to our business.
Yeah, you got a business model predicated upon access to the outdoors and natural resources, and those opportunities, right?
Right, and we've got a lot of people in our space and our competitors. On the outdoor rec side and on the shooting sports side, they just leave it to their trade association to do that work. So our two main trade associations are the National Shooting Sports Foundation and the Outdoor Industry Association. And sometimes those two groups are diametrically opposed on issues and philosophies. And we want to have seats at the table with both of them. And we hope that we're a moderating force, because one of our philosophies in our corporate conservation compass is that conservation is bipartisan. And if it becomes partisan, then everybody's going to lose, because you've got this pendulum that swings back and forth in so many states, and it's negative. So I want Republicans to be better on the environment and conservation and public lands, and I want Democrats to be better on guns and business and hunting. And if I can achieve those two things through our company, then I think the business environment for us is going to be better. But more importantly, I think America is going to be a better place to live, because the wild places that we so care about in the West and in the East and the Midwest, that's part of what makes America great. And
I think you've just started the lyrics to your song, and you can weave Minnesota into that.
I'll do my best to try to figure out. Minnesota doesn't rhyme with a lot of stuff.
North Dakota.
We need to teach you what rhyming means.
So in all seriousness, I mean, you just captured. The essence of American politics. I mean, it's kind of funny, but you just said it. These two groups. Maybe if we could just take those two groups that your trade organizations and as an example, kind of how you said, like you have these, and these outliers, but as you said, Vista's just trying to drive right down the center, and I think in American politics, man, if we could all do that, wow.
Mm-hmm. That's Nephi's resonating message. He always pounds this home. Like,
this
how do you come down the middle?
Yeah, and you said it. I mean, if we could get rid of again the outlying philosophies, because those people that want to take away opportunities for the use of that public lands resource. And I don't really think there are that many people. I think that boogeyman's been put out there by the opposite side. Mm-hmm. And I think in some ways it's the same way on the opposite side with, you mentioned gun issues. If we could, most of America is not on these outliers. We're right in the middle. And you guys are in the sweet spot.
Well, it doesn't always feel like the sweet spot.
Well, that's because I think at the outliers want to scream at you.
Right. It's on the poles. It's the extreme sides, and we look at issues. A lot of people became aware of Vista Outdoor when after one of our recent gun tragedies that we had folks that had an organized campaign that they were ready. We're publicly traded, so that makes us a company
a target.
That's a target that went after us, tried to convince us and our retail partners, to boycott us. Basically,
can I bring it? So what happened is, for everybody that doesn't know, you guys. So Vista Outdoors, again, you guys make a lot of different products, and an outdoor retailer called REI came out and took an action, correct, where they basically put a hold on orders of your products.
Yeah,
and seeking you guys, asking for you guys, if I'm correct, to take a public stance on this issue, and you guys just kind of said, no, we're just going to walk middle, we're going to be pragmatic like we always have. And then they made some statements, right? Or some other people did.
It was organized. REI and the retailers didn't start this. This was an organized campaign by activists online targeting, and it was a fascinating strategy to watch from inside. As I'm a biologist, but I've always been around politics and watching the political science of it. Science in air quotes with political science. But I watched it.
You just defended a bunch of political scientists now.
I'm pretty. If I don't offend a whole bunch of more groups by the end of this podcast, we're doing something wrong.
You're not doing your job.
But so they targeted us because we're publicly traded and we're broad, and we've got products that are, that people clearly associate not with guns, but with the other side of the political spectrum. And there's retailers that are probably lean that way as well, and they don't feel comfortable. They don't sell guns, so why would they get in the gun issue? That was, it was a targeted campaign. They put a lot of pressure on some retailers, REI, and it was a difficult time. The biggest difficulty for us was that the demands that were coming out from the boycott crowd were just unacceptable. We weren't, we are the largest manufacturer of ammunition in the country. We're one of the biggest gun manufacturers. We support the Second Amendment. We support our customers' right to choose, the firearms that they want to defend themselves, to hunt with. And we're not going to abandon that. And that what they wanted us to was to abandon that position in favor of and what they were trying to hold hostage was the other products that we make that are in the outdoor space.
Water bottles.
So, but we've seen the exact opposite happen a number of times too, where the pro-gun crowd extremists, the keyboard warriors that don't need to be pragmatic, they want to boycott everybody that isn't completely pure on issues as well. They want us to boycott certain retailers. And look, boycotts are fun for the keyboard warrior, but they don't really move the needle in public discourse anywhere.
Does it ever frustrate you in this putting your biologist hat on for a second? Does it ever frustrate you in this world knowing that you've got activists that are out there pushing so hard, trying to get boycotts of ammunition and firearms companies, or any companies that sell those, right? Mm-hmm. And they're these same folks that, so on one hand, are doing that, and on the other hand, they're trying to push products to get people out into the outdoors, and it seems diametrically opposed when those sales that you have from firearms and ammunition are paying more for conservation than
how much did Vista pay into conservation last year just through Pittman Robertson dollars?
So over the last 5 years, our average has been $85 million a year. A couple years ago, we reported 87. It peaked. So $85 million is in 4 different checks, because we have to pay our Pittman Robertson taxes 4 times a year,
and that's
every quarter.
As a reminder, that's the 11% roughly, right? That excise tax on for manufacturers of firearms and ammunition
Right.
and so forth that goes back into this fund that's then distributed back.
So the vast majority of that $85 million a year each year over the last 5 years has been from ammo, which is an 11% tax, and then we also pay 11% tax on our rifles that Savage builds, and then we own gold tip arrows and we own Bee Stinger stabilizers, which are archery gear. Both of those pay an 11% tax. Arrows actually has a little different formula; they pay per arrow, but the details of that's not terribly important. The important thing is those products are paying a tax that no one else in the country is paying.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've been working very hard on is, and you guys did a good job with it when you covered this in your previous podcast, it's how I discovered on It's Your Mountain, was that issue. But what a lot of people in the outdoor world say is they say guns and ammo and other outdoor products. They always say that. No. There is no other outdoor products. It is guns, it is archery gear, and it is ammo, and that's it. And no one else pays Pittman Robertson taxes. Only
Right.
those products. Only those products. And that's important because people think, well, if I buy a camouflage shirt, I'm paying that tax. No, you're not.
Yeah, backpack, you're not.
Right.
Yeah. Rain gear, you're not. So Dave.
Oh, I've got a story to tell you. I have rain gear now. I have rain gear. Total sidebar. This is a total sidebar. But Nephi has just been calling me hefty recently.
Because his rain gear was a hefty bag.
Because I notoriously, when I hunt or backpack or anything, I want to be as light as possible. And so I just roll up a hefty bag and shove it in my...
Butch Whiting from Cryptech is the guy that gave him that nickname. So don't give me too much credit.
Yeah, so it's because I showed him this picture of me on the top. I climbed Cloud Peak in the Bighorn Mountains in northern Wyoming in the summer of 2017, and it was spitting snow and rain and everything. And I show him this picture, and he's like, "What the hell are you wearing?" And when I elk hunt, I take two because sometimes I'm sitting for long periods, so I have to have one that goes over me, and then one that I can that goes over my torso and covers my pack that I've got on it, and then one that I can put over my lap to keep the tops of my legs dry if I'm sitting on a log or something. So Nephi would appreciate this that I was now. I was gifted a rain set or rain gear last month, so I want to be clear that I didn't actually purchase, but I actually have rain gear now.
Well, I think you missed the opportunity. This was your chance to do a free 30-second read of an ad for Hefty Bags, and maybe they'd come on as sponsor.
Oh man, and I should have just said generic.
You should just
black
stuck
garbage
with
bag because it probably was a generic bag.
Yeah, Hefties are expensive.
Yeah, I don't want to waste those on myself. Sorry, that was a gigantic tangent. But you were talking about the sources of revenue going into PR.
So Hefty bags do not.
No
11% of a Hefty bag is going to PR.
Right. And so oftentimes and I've started the conversation in the outdoor world, and you want to get liberal outdoor rec companies mad at you real quick, start talking about increasing their taxes, and all of a sudden they turn into hardcore right-wing Republicans. It's kind of funny, but I've brought up the idea of, look, we know there's this huge backlog in maintenance on federal lands. State parks I think we're up to $14 billion is what the running tab is.
On national parks,
on
right?
national parks. Yeah. On national parks. I'm sorry. And so we've got this huge backlog, and finding the money to pay for it seems hard. And I've often thought, if we were to create a Pittman Robertson-like tax on outdoor rec gear in the same way, you'd be able to fund that maintenance pretty quickly.
Yeah. So that's one of the Outdoor Industry Association is one of, you mentioned it's one of your trade associations, right? I mean, they formed, correct me if I'm wrong, but they formed in the first place to fight against a push for a backpack tax.
Right. That's absolutely true. And there's been efforts in the past, even in the outdoor, in the shooting sports space. There's been efforts. People have talked about adding optics, gun scopes and stuff. And a lot of companies that aren't currently paying the tax didn't think that was a very good idea, opposed it, and so it's never gone anywhere. And it probably won't go anywhere. I just think that it's important that as a community we're able to talk about that as a potential issue. And if for no other reason, just so that everyone else understands and appreciates that hunters and shooters even more than hunters, are paying this tax. Because
especially if a shooter is a hunter too.
Right.
I mean, that's a double.
Right.
Yeah.
So our company writes the 11% check to the IRS, and it gets passed on. But let's face it, the cost of our products go up as a result. So if Pittman Robertson were to go away, would the price of ammo go down 11%? I don't know. Probably not, because it's a pretty low margin product. But price of ammo and guns would certainly go down. You would pay less as a consumer because right now that tax is added on to everything else, and then on top of that, then you pay the sales tax, if you're in a state with sales tax and everything else. So I make my friends in the outdoor rec world, the Outdoor Industry Association, very uncomfortable when I bring this topic up. But I think it's good that they're uncomfortable, because they need to face the reality that the hunting and shooting public is disproportionately paying for conservation in America.
We had a couple different guests that have kind of broached those subjects. So a couple of weeks ago, when Dave wasn't here, we had Di and Ryan Mueller from who are professional shooters on, and they talked about how much they spend in an average year, and it's eye-opening how much they spend on just on ammo and firearms as competitive shooters. But the other thing I was going to say was we've had so you guys sponsor through Savage, you sponsor Steve Rinella, and I know that it's a business, and so there's different reasons, and I don't know if he's still shooting Savages next year or whatever, but thank you guys for doing that. I mean, you've supported people who are a voice for those conservation causes, and one of the people that he associates with, Ryan Callahan, who from First Light, and Ryan has been a big voice, and I've seen him at many of these conferences talking with bridging that gap between those two communities, the hunting community and the traditional, non-hunting outdoor rec community. And I wonder if this isn't, the great opportunity for hunters to do that. I mean, what a perfect group to be able to reach across and make that sales pitch and teach that lesson, and in a way, not only help the resource, but maybe help the future of hunting in general by reaching out and being inclusive and getting that community to think about maybe I should be hunting and fishing.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up Callahan, because I'm not close friends with Cal, but we're becoming pretty good friends, because we talk about these issues. And it's good for me, because sometimes I feel pretty lonely out in the hunting and shooting world, talking about this outreach across the political aisle and everything else to the outdoor rec world. He has certainly been doing that. He went to Outdoor Retailer this year. He spent time with Patagonia and North Face and all of the REI and talked to all these companies. And I got feedback not only from him, hearing him talk about places he's making progress and bridging some of those things, but also from the outdoor rec world, saying how cool it was that here's this guy. First Light's not, I don't think they sell at Outdoor Retailer. I mean, they're selling at SHOT Show and others, but he was there specifically, working on that issue. There's a group of us in the industry that are trying to develop those relationships and work across the lines. Frankly, I think you guys are playing a pretty huge role in through this podcast, but also through what you do in your day jobs. I think if we can build up enough momentum and enough connections with folks that care about the resource, care about the Second Amendment, care about public lands, and care about all of those things, we can help reach across the aisle and grab some people who maybe only care about two of those and don't care about the Second Amendment. But if they, hopefully they understand, I'm not this three-headed monster that the Bloombergs and the New York Times and and the Washington Post try to paint gun companies. We're real people that absolutely are staunch defenders of our Second Amendment rights.
And I think that the thing that here's where it gets lost. You're much more than that.
Right.
And I think that's where the educational opportunity is there. I think most of it is misunderstanding on both. So whether it's Second Amendment or whether it's, for example, public lands, I think when people see, they think that they don't understand the broad level of interest that not just a company like yours has, but that the individuals who participate in this sport have. Mm-hmm. And it really sounds cheesy. It's all great things American. It's and when you bring people into that family, into that community by teaching them. And this is why I think it's important to take people out to the range shooting. It's why I think it's important to take people out hunting or take your buddy fishing if people haven't been. You can convert people. Mm-hmm. This is a winnable battle by the sportsman community because we are in the right place. Mm-hmm. And if we can bring people in, if we're willing to reach out there and invite them, we win because you can't argue with what we have.
Well, you said it before. It's conservation it has been kind of politicized, but conservation should not be right. A Republican or Democrat thing. Conservation should be an American thing, right? And that's where you can be staunchly pro Second Amendment, and you can be pro public land and access. It's all synergy, right. And you can support everybody paying their fair share.
Yeah.
Because that's better for the whole resource if everybody pays their fair share. I don't know.
I like to encapsulate all in this little controversy that occurred in the state of Wyoming that the rest of the nation probably doesn't know about, but our university there is called the Wyoming Cowboys.
Cowboy up.
Cowboy up. We had this big controversy because a new ad campaign for the university was "The world needs more cowboys."
Yeah. And
somebody decided that wasn't, that was somehow, all things politically incorrect. But when you saw the ad campaign, that like when you didn't, make it, when you see it, you understand that it's not about where you're from. It's not about, gender. It's not about any of these things. It's about those ideals of those ideals of self-reliance, of friendship, of responsibility, of just that of being an American.
The world needs more Wyomings.
The world needs more cowboys.
Not just cowboys, more. I say more because
and
the
a
world
cowboy doesn't have to wear a cowboy hat, or like Dave, may not own a pair of cowboy boots. But I think that for me, that's kind of this community, this sportsman's community, this Lewis and Clark. Those are cowboys. That's us. That's who we are. We're explorers as a nation. And I think we need to be proud of that heritage and that culture and embrace that. The world needs more of what we are.
They do. They also need more of what you're doing, which is this face-to-face relationship building. Yeah. The problem is you have folks, touched on it before, hiding behind a keyboard.
Yeah.
Right? And we have 320 million people in this country, and it becomes increasingly easier to gain anonymity, to lob shots and create division. Yeah. Right? And it's the personal communication. Why I said the world needs more Wyomings is because the Wyoming saying, and it probably applies in other smaller rural states too. But in Wyoming, we're just a small town with really long streets.
Yeah.
Meaning we have relationships and they matter all over the state. And you have to have that personal face-to-face interaction, and something you do or say has consequences. And we need that.
We do. It's easy to vilify when you just paint this caricature of who you perceive your enemy to be. And that's why right now, every Republican in the country is being called a Nazi because they need to create this cartoonish villain, if you're opposed to the Republicans, and every Democrat is a commie. Well, socialist,
yeah,
socialist now. So those kinds of they're caricatures, and it's just trying to make people bad. So in our realm, the gun guys look at the outdoor rec people as a bunch of dirty hippies, and the dirty hippies look at the gun guys as these crazy whacked out right wing just nutballs. And with rare exception, neither of those are true.
And you're working
right.
with both of them.
Yeah, I am.
Because
so you can verify that neither is true.
Well,
right.
you said it. I mean, again, it's that beginning thing. Like, we are not the outliers.
Mm-hmm.
We are the middle. And although there might be some people there might be outliers who are trying to drive a certain perception or business interest for their own reasons. The reality is we, as Americans, we're in the middle.
Right.
We are doing all these things.
Yeah.
Most of us, we run the gamut. We ride bicycles, but we hunt. Or I'm a competitive shooter who who climbs. There's all these things. We're broader than that.
It's funny because for whatever reason, everyone wants to make themselves victims in America today, and that's true of the shooting sports side and everything else as well. Maybe it's we used to want to be underdogs, but now it's kind of we victimize ourselves. And so what I've seen, boy, this has turned into a big political philosophy.
Right. This is getting
It's
really
the political
deep.
scientists in the room.
Yeah.
I'm not a political
I'm a
scientist.
biologist.
Yeah, me too. And a lawyer. I'm not a political scientist. And you're a soil scientist. What are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know. But
we're out of our element here.
But I think hunters and shooters think of themselves as outside of the norm, because maybe the New York Times creates that image that we are. And yet I was at the Utah Outdoor Rec Conference last week, and I had a guy come up and ask me. He was a climber. He was an activist climber. And I was on a panel with REI's government relations guy and the government relations person from Cool, Utah clothing company. And so we were talking about a bunch of things, but afterwards the guy comes up and he says, how do we become more mainstream like your hunters? And I was like,
wait a minute.
Wait.
We're not mainstream.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so I started having the discussion. He says, yeah, you're politically active. You've got these organizations. You're engaged. He starts describing, which to some extent are true. He was a rock climber. He's a mountain climber. And I said, you don't think that you're mainstream? He says, no. I mean, we're on the fringe. Rock climbers are on the fringe. And then I started to think, do mountain bikers think they're on the fringe? I don't.
Probably.
They may think they are.
They're a very small community that nobody really gets.
So, but the one thing that I said to him was the difference between rock climbers, in my perception, and the gun community is we have an existential threat. There's people that are trying to actually take away what we do and the things we own and the activities we engage. There are people that say you shouldn't be able to do that anymore. I don't know of a lot of people that are saying you can't rock climb anymore. Now, I realize there's some resource issues with damaging rock cliffs and things that people have some concerns, but
specific locations could be affected, but not the ability to rock climb in its entirety. Right.
There's not an organization out there that's dedicated to trying to shut down rock climbers, and there's a whole list of organizations that are their sole purpose in life is try to make guns disappear from the United States. So when I explained to him why sometimes we're so well organized, it's because there are existential threats to us, and those things tend to rally people a lot more. I would contend that the public lands issues, if public lands, were to be taken away, and I think the threat of that is much lower than what people lead you to believe. But let's just say, what if that is an existential threat to a lot of user groups.
Yeah.
So that's why I think people get wound up about the issue so much.
So, I think it's I think that the divide and conquer is, that's a popular way for attacking things. If you wanted to, I've heard somebody say the other day, you eat how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And I think that kind of transitions to something that does affect the hunting and shooting community. And I know that you guys are pretty active, and you guys talk a lot about lead issues. Mm-hmm. And so, are you comfortable touching on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty open and public about this. A lot of folks who interact with me think of me as the pro lead guy, and that's not an accurate description of me at all. But I work for an ammo company, and the vast majority of our products are lead-based, and there's a reason that we use lead in bullets, in shot. And it's very straightforward. It's chemical, mechanical, and economical. Lead is really, really, really dense. It's 11 grams per cubic centimeter. I just don't worry about getting too wound up about remembering that, but 11.
Uh-huh.
Lead is 11. Steel, copper, all of the other alternatives are 8-9 grams per cubic centimeter, so lighter. And then we've got products like gold and platinum and tungsten. Tungsten is 19 grams per cubic centimeter, so much more dense. So you've got this continuum, but there's not any other real metal that exists on the periodic table. And people come to me all the time and say, why can't you guys come up with a new alloy or whatever? And it's like, have you seen the periodic table? That's what we have to work with, people. There's
science.
And people say, well, plastics. Plastics are light.
Yeah.
Polymers are light.
Not a lot of density in plastic.
So even if you're playing with an alloy, to get densities on par with what lead is, you need to start with something that is at least as dense or more dense and mix it with other things.
So go back to that 3 things. Why that's important?
Well, it's important because lead functions in a way that makes a bullet. So the mechanical side is it's got a job to do. It's to efficiently dispatch an animal humanely. That's our top priority. And lead, because of its chemical properties, that it's malleable and that it obturates, meaning that it mushrooms. So when it hits a solid something, it forms a mushroom, expands. It is it's not the only, but it's the best material for transferring the energy, the kinetic energy of that traveling object into an object that transfers the energy that makes trauma, that causes an animal to die as quickly as possible. So a perfect bullet goes through the vital areas, expands, delivers all of this shock trauma, and it's direct trauma from the bullet tearing through flesh, but also from the pressure wave that comes around it. And if you ever look at the Federal Premium logo, I'm wearing one, that's a shock wave. It's illustrating what the bullet does as it's going through the animal.
Yep.
So the bullet has to do that work to be effective. And so there are alternative products that you could build bullets out of. Gold would be a great
gold
material.
Is what I want my bullets built out of from now on.
So it would be awesome because gold.
Could you send me a box to test?
I will. So
thank you.
Could you forgive our dues to NSSF for a year, because that's what it would cost. So.
I can't do that because.
See, I'm pretty good at turning
there.
back.
Yeah, I see what you did there. Yeah.
So
gold is expensive.
Gold's very expensive. Won't work. Clearly platinum, uranium, all those other really dense things. They're prohibitively expensive. Lead is cheap. Lead is less than $1 a pound. When lead prices went through the roof a few years ago, they got to $1.50. So lead's cheap, readily available, easy to manufacture. It's got a really low melting point, which from a carbon footprint standpoint, there's less energy inputs that go into it. All of these things lead to why we use lead. That being said, lead, if ingested by a mammal, by a bird, functions as a neurotoxin. And because the body is confused when it takes up lead ions and thinks that they're calcium. So lead is a neurotoxin. You don't want to consume lead. However, we've seen folks wanting to overregulate traditional lead bullets, overstating the risks they have to some animals.
So coming back to the
condors,
there are a lot of things that when you there are a lot of things that you shouldn't ingest because they're toxic in high qualities. Salt,
right?
Sugar, water.
Alcohol.
No, I mean there's definitely a scale here.
Let's be careful to oversimplify, but I think it's. We're talking about. I mean, you talk salt and water, and that's different from lead. But I mean, what kind of evidence is there out there that you've seen that say the average elk hunter? Because I don't know the numbers.
By the way, don't discount salt too quickly. There's different kinds of salts, and that's what I'm saying is that there's definitely levels of risk for anything that you're going to ingest as a person, and I think that's what I'm saying. Well,
but what I want to get back to is to differentiate between those risks, because it strikes me as actually, while lead certainly can have those toxic effects, you're not going to go out there and scoop up a handful of shot and throw it in your mouth, right? And so really it's in the human environment, with all the hunters that we have on the landscape using lead. Have we seen, what kind of research are we seeing coming out of that?
Look, anytime anyone has looked with any vigor at the threat of lead ammunition to humans, it really doesn't exist. The only times where they find diagnosable clinical lead levels that are affecting humans is usually it's folks that are subsistence hunters in northern Canada, places like that. They found a few places. Otherwise, it's a rarity where a piece of lead becomes embedded in the appendix. The appendix becomes inflamed, which creates an acidic condition, which then makes that lead
break down,
bioavailable. Lead
and when little kids eat paint chips,
right? Paint. Well,
like a paint in Dave's house.
So that's important. So the state of Iowa looked at it it was North Dakota looked at it, evaluated hunters, and what they found was that your blood lead level was most linked to how old your house was. If you had a 1950s or older house, your lead levels were elevated. It was because of the paint. Hunters had barely perceptible differences in their blood lead levels from non-hunters. But I think so the whole issue about regulating lead ammunition has nothing to do with humans. No one is concerned about the human health issues.
It's other animals.
It's about other animals. So California, which is in the process of making their whole state lead free for hunting, that was all built around the condor issue. Condors are a unique situation. We've got a few hundred of them in the world, a couple hundred that are free flying. They're clearly endangered. They only feed on carcasses, of carrion, and so they're particularly at danger of lead exposure. So there's a very specific issue that affects condors. What we've seen is that activists have tried to take what they did in California and bring it to the rest of the country. And there are a couple other places in the country that have condors. Utah, Arizona has condors. They're talking about bringing them up to Oregon.
You know what? On condors, earlier this summer, there was a condor confirmed, I think about a 2-year-old, confirmed on top of Medicine Bow Peak in south central Wyoming.
Really?
They have a number of pictures of it and ended up dying 3 days later or something like that. Mm-hmm. But so they're actually starting to move into some places they haven't been in a long, long time.
Which are those are great wins for conservation.
Sure.
We don't want to see any species become extinct.
I should say no confirmation that it died from lead poisoning.
Right. Well, I mean, it's an early migrant. Pioneers died all the time. So what the issue that people are tying it to, trying to export these restrictions elsewhere, are eagles. And there are a lot of people that truly are they're doing this because in their hearts they think it's the right thing to do. You've got organizations like the Peregrine Fund and others that they're committed to it. The issue is you've got other organizations like Humane Society of the United States that they're the ones that sponsored this legislation in California. For them, this is an issue that they can make hunting harder and more expensive.
Yeah, and that's the goal.
Yeah, that's their goal. Mm-hmm. Because if you go to an alternative, you go to a copper bullet, copper bullets are always going to be more expensive than lead bullets. Always. There is nothing that the industry can do. There's no hocus pocus, because copper costs at least 4 times what lead does to start with. It's a harder material. So the machining and everything that goes into building the bullet is more complicated. That adds price in the process. So when you build a copper bullet for big game and you build a lead bullet for big game, the copper bullet's always going to be more expensive.
Dave and I both use lead-based bullets for different reasons. And so, which, Dave, because they're inexpensive.
And effective.
and me, and I use and I think I use some copper bullets, like a Barnes bullet. I think it's very effective. And I make different choices based on what rifle I'm using and what type of animal I think I'm going to be around. But part of it's because I do long range competition shooting and I value bullets with a high ballistic coefficient, for reasons that, long range hunting I think is a very strange concept to try and, define and regulate. But quite frankly, like, I like a 215 grain Burger hybrid pushed out of a 300 Win Mag because I know what kind of energy I have downrange at a variety of velocities. And I just don't think that there's anything better for what I like to hunt if I'm hunting elk. And so I don't think there's anything better than lead.
So I'm going to give the It's Your Mountain podcast an exclusive. We're coming out.
Let me correct you really quick. Your Mountain podcast.
Okay, Your Mountain. Okay.
By the way, Federal does have a great 130 grain 6.5 Creedmoor with a Burger hybrid on it. Use that also.
All right. So post-production, you could edit out its. But so this is exclusive to Your Mountain podcast. We are coming to market this fall. Stores are starting to actually take delivery of a Burger hunting bullet in a bunch of calibers. So we're adding the Burger bullet. And then since we were talking about copper, we are bringing back the Barnes triple shock bullet and adding it to our lineup of Federal ammunition. So we are now...
Well, those are premium bullets, both of those.
Those are both premium bullets. And so we are now going to have 3 different copper bullet options for hunters only within our line. So you can go and buy... You'll be able to buy the Barnes Triple Shock, which we loaded for, a decade or more before a big green gun company bought them and made our access to those bullets a little more difficult. We've got our Trophy Copper bullet, which is a bullet that we build ourselves with a partner out in Oregon, and then we've got our own Power Shock Copper, which is the cheapest, most basic copper bullet we could build to bring the price down as much as possible to make it affordable. Power Shock is our blue box line of the more affordable ammunition. So we offer 3 different copper bullets within our line. So we are not anti-copper bullets. We want hunters to be able to choose what bullet they want to use. We just can't support any sort of regulations that would take away that choice without a very good biological reason, and there is no biological reason anywhere in the country to restrict lead bullets, to ban them. So that's our position. We want to give hunters the ability to choose the bullet that they want, and hopefully we'll load it to their specs and it'll work.
Giving people opportunities to make intelligent choices, I think, is the absolute best way to do business, whatever stage you want to, informing people, good information people are smart. They can make good decisions themselves. So, you touched on this a little bit when you talked about lead ammo. So I have a curiosity. I talked about what's your thoughts on, you're with the Boone and Crockett Club, correct? You have a position over there.
Well, I'm a professional member of the Boone and Crockett Club, yeah.
I know they took they've had some thoughts on, long range, and we talked about this a little bit. With lead bullets, one of the reasons I like them is because I think that they have a really high ballistic coefficient, and I value the ability to be able to, if I needed to, shoot it at a distance. So, for example, one of the things that I have a friend who talks about this a lot, guy who's a pioneer long range, shooter, and people would call him a long range hunter, but I don't know that that's fair. I don't know that term's fair. But he said, if you wound an animal and the only shot, your next shot that you have available is 800 yards away, and that animal's moving, are you going to take that shot? And so I think that you should practice and you should have the equipment to be able to take the shot you need to humanely dispatch an animal.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that long range?
Well, I think it's subjective because long range for one person might not be long range for another. But so the Boone and Crockett position is essentially that you should, if you're shooting animals from a point where they can't detect you're there, that's kind of violating the spirit of fair chase. That's the Boone and Crockett position. I get that, but 600 yards, is that too far? 800 yards, is that too far? 400 yards?
If you're doing it right, 50 yards.
I was going to say, Dave,
because they don't sense I'm there.
I feel the same way. I mean, my goal is to not have them know I'm there, whether that's 20 yards with my bow, or whether it's whatever yardage.
Yeah. So you hear the stories from outfitters these days where they'll get a client on an elk, and the client will say, "We're too close, let's back up," which is completely a foreign concept to any other any outfitter. So I understand.
I wonder if those are true though.
I wonder if they are too. I've never experienced it, but I've heard those anecdotes, and I think that's rare, and I think there's probably an outlier. So
it might be species specific too.
Could be.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Nobody cares if you take an 800-yard shot at a coyote or a prairie dog, but if it's an elk or a deer, then they get concerned, which is a whole another philosophical discussion. We probably should have as a hunting community. But we build bullets that'll work at long distances. Copper bullets are not one of those options. If you're shooting really long distances, don't shoot copper bullets, because if there's not enough energy to cause those petals to peel back, that bullet will zip right through without ever opening, and you basically put a pinhole through the animal, which is not what you want the bullet to do. We've got our Edge TLR bullet, we've got the Berger hunting bullet that we're coming out with that are bullets that are designed to perform at long distances. After the bullets have bled off a lot of their energy, they'll still open and do their work. So we offer those products. We've got long range hunting scopes, the LRHS from Bushnell. LRHS is long range hunting scope. So we support that. The one thing that I would preach is there are shots that are too far. That, remember, even a bullet takes time to get to that animal, and if you're shooting from such a distance where it can take a step and now you're gut shooting it instead of putting it in the vitals, that's too far. And so, circumstances, there's fair chase issues that I think are important, because fair chase principles are one of the things that non-hunters think we should restrict ourselves to some extent, because we're humans, we've got tools, and I agree with that. I'm with that, but there's no way to draw a line that says this is right and this is wrong in that realm. It's a continuum.
And I think to be honest, I think it's personal. Like a lot of people, and I think that distance is personal too. I think from my perspective, the ethics of Nephi Cole's head are these: if there's a question, the shot is too far. Mm-hmm. And so from my perspective, if I'm, and I know the parameters enough to know that there are a lot more questions than some people might think that there are. Mm-hmm. And so, for me, when you start to get to the distance where you, again, if there's a question, it's too far. If you are, when you make the decision to pull the trigger and there's a question mark in your mind of like, I wonder if, then it is not the right, that it's not the right shot. It's you owe it to that animal to have certainty, or to at least have near certainty that when you pull that trigger, when you make that shot, it is ethical and you're making that, that decision the right way. And I think for everybody, that distance is going to be different. But if you're at 200 yards and there's a question mark in your head, it's like, oh, I wonder if I'm going, then you're too far. Get closer or go to the range and practice. And that's what I preach to people is like,
and contribute to Pittman Robertson
into conservation and I'm dead serious about it. I mean, it's why Dave knows I tell people to, competitive shoot all the time, because, then 100 yards, then putting every shot into a tennis ball at 100 yards becomes very easy, and it should be very easy if you're a hunter. And then, you're going to turn that into a softball size at 200 yards. It's going to be very easy until you can get out to 300 to 400 yards. And then you can start to go, okay, well, bullet selection, rifle selection, optic selection. Then those things start to matter when
Well, and then also the concepts of fair chase start to weigh in the farther out you get, and you have to have that ethical conversation with yourself. I think that's a bigger conversation for another episode. On the next episode.
Right. But and that will change for all of us, and it'll change for all of us from year to year. And that's my take home. That's my take home point. Let everyone have that personal growth within themselves from year to year. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to literally sit down with Dave and say, hey, Dave, you need to have my ethics. And if you can't, do this and that exactly the way that I think is ethically right, you're not an ethical hunter. Because Dave's walk through life as a hunter is going to be at his pace. And at some point...
Well, it's because you got a hefty bag slowing him down.
Yeah,
that's pretty light. It's ultra light. It doesn't slow me down at all.
and you'll have your ethics. Yeah. And as long as we're all moving in the right direction of, we really care about conservation, we care about the animals, we care about the species, we care about the future of the sport, we're going to be heading in the right direction. As long as we keep that in mind, it doesn't mean that we're going to be at the same spot on the trail.
So, yeah, I think making sure that you keep that care for the animal, that your stewardship responsibility for a humane kill, that's got to be first. If the only reason you're doing long range shooting is it's a challenge for you and it's for your own personal glory,
then do it at the range.
Do it at the range.
Yep.
That's where
or
you
do it on a prairie dog.
Well, we can even have a discussion if that's the right thing to do or not. Right?
Dave eats those.
That's a conversation. They're not good. So anybody out there that's like, I want to take home a prairie dog and try it, I can tell you it's not worth kebabbing those.
It doesn't matter how much marinade you use.
There's just something about them. They're not that great. Before you go, so it sounds like you listened to our podcast.
I have.
So when we have guests on, we ask them a question at the end of this thing.
You ask, what's your mountain?
I do. I ask, what's your mountain?
That's why I was inserting that earlier, I think.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Minnesota, and I've got a lot of mountains, my special places, but so on my farm, it's a tamarack swamp that goes through the middle, and the uplands is mixed oak and aspen and black ash. And the backside is all tamarack swamp, and there's this wedge of birch trees that's in the transition area right in the middle. And I have killed 3 different bucks within 50-yard circle of this old tamarack tree, and it busted off a couple of years ago. We had an insect outbreak, and all the tamaracks died, but it had a big hump in it. And so I've killed 3 deer there, and I don't know, I'm getting emotional now, but that's that spot when I need a quiet place. I go into that wedge of birch trees right next to that and sit there. And look, it's not public land, it's mine. I own it. But that's my special place, and I think about those deer, and I think about the barred owl that sat 20 feet from me one time when I was in the stand back there, and all those things, and that's my spot.
Man, you can tell that's genuine. I mean, you're welling up, telling us kind of your spot.
Yeah,
that's what this is all. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, that's amazing. And I know that resonates with people because I know other people have similar stories and similar feelings about about their mountain.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality. We all have one.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome, guys.
Really appreciate you taking this time. I've been contemplating the appropriate way to end these podcasts. We're still kind of early in our podcasting journey. Like, and do we have to have a formal ending or just trail off to nothingness? And I was thinking, and we've talked about it before, and so I'm going to try something. Life's about experiences. Go experience it.
Go have some. That's great. Thank you again.
Awesome, guys.
Mike here from the Your Mountain Podcast. We need a favor. Go on our website, itsyourmountain.com, and find the links to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram so that you can like and follow us, and also so that you can share us with your friends. Wherever you got this podcast from, go ahead and click subscribe, rate us, and leave a comment. These simple things will really help us get the word out. That's itsyourmountain.com. Thanks for the help.